Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is a problem that a customer had, and I'm going to tell you about the solution to solving it. And it's really important you listen to this because I guarantee it happens to more people than you think, and they never think twice about it. So I'm going to tell you the whole thing with it. However, this one is going to be in the form of a story. And I know some of you hate it when I do stories because you feel like I get off on a rant and whatnot, and that's probably true, but I think it adds to the story. And trust me when I say this, you're gonna get something out of this video. Trust me. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So I got a customer that's been with me for a long time, and his name's Tony. I won't give his last name. Tony's a super nice guy. He's a hardworking guy, great guy. I ported heads for him in the past. We've dynoed engine. I've dynoed an engine for him before. We took it to a place and dynoed together, did all tuning stuff. I think we actually even might have built that engine together. Anyway, he's been a customer for a long time. But the thing about Tony is he's kind of cheap. So I'm not making fun of him, and he wouldn't feel offended if I said any of this either. But he's kind of cheap, and it plays a part of the story. So, but anyway, Tony, I haven't done any major work for him probably, I don't know, probably a year or so. But he calls me up about, I don't know, a month ago and says, hey man, I put this engine together. And I should point out, this engine he'd put together, he'd been calling me throughout the year to ask me stuff. So he'd be like, hey man, what do you think about this camshaft? By the way, that's one of the worst questions I hate getting asked. And I don't mean like what you're thinking, like which what cam spec should I run with my ported heads? No, it's the ones where they go, what do you think about this 12-34-22-77 cam, or this Howard's 973242 cam? Like I'm supposed to memorize every part number that's ever existed in every catalog. No, give me the specs. And I also hate it too because I know he's not buying the cam from me. So in other words, he's asking me to be tech support for these two cam companies. I hate those questions. But Tony's a good guy, so I try to answer it. So he tells me, he asks for the cam specs, I give him the cam specs. He says, hey man, what about some heads, man? I said, you know what you need to get set of. I would love to do one of my ported heads, but you don't have enough time. He's like, I don't have enough time. How about some AFR 195s? Oh, I think that'd be your best bet. He's like, all right, sweet, how much are they? So I tell him a price, and I said, I don't have any in stock. It's gonna take me a little while to get them from AFR. What's he do? He buys them from another place. That's Tony. So point being is, he's calling me up and he's asking for advice on an engine that I've sold him 0 pieces for. So I want you to understand this. Not that I was being rude, but I want you to understand this. So Tony calls me up and says, man, I got this problem with this engine. Now he's got a run stand at home and he's got the engine running on it. And he says, it's making this tapping sounds. And I've had everybody listen to it, and I know you're good at this stuff, and you're supposed to be a guru, and I know you're good at this. Can you just come over and hear it, please, man? This thing has got me all kinds of stuff, please. So now I haven't sold him anything on it, but I'm a nice guy. I said, all right, Tony, as long as you provide me some food. And I know he makes tacos, so he said, you give me tacos, I'll come over and listen to it. So I go over one day and I go over and listen to it. And he starts up the engine on the run stand, and the driver's side sounds pretty normal, but there is definitely, and it's not a tapping, it's like a solid lifter camshaft is what it sounds like on the passenger side. I'm like, man, Tony, I don't know, man. I think it might be your lifters. He's running these, because he also asked me, hey, man, you got any lifters? Of course I don't have any lifters in stock, so he finds something instead of wait for me to get him something. He buys these set of lifters, and they're Howards, and to go with this Howard cam that he asked the recommendation on, and they're making some noise. I'm like, man, some of those Howards are Morels, and those Morels, contrary to the one salesman online, they're loud. So I was like, he's like, no, these Howards are made by Gatorman. And that guy, I talked to him, and he swears if there's anything wrong with them, he'll replace them. I said, man, I can't tell, but it kind of sounds like a lifter. But I'm not 100% because it seems weird that you're only having it on the passenger side. I can only really hear it, and especially on just these 2 cylinders. And he's like, I know, man, isn't that weird? I said, yeah, I don't know, maybe just have bad pair in those 2 cylinders. He goes, all right, yeah. I said, but before I go, let's look into something, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I'll tell you the one thing I looked at before I left. It gets ignored anyway. But anyway, what he does is he does the following, because it's on the run stand. He goes far beyond what most people do. He actually took off the intake manifold and he took the lifters from the driver's side and put it in the passenger side. And the passenger side, he put it in the driver's side. Starts it back up and puts it all back together, starts up with the engine stand. Same thing on the passenger side. And he's like, man, I am totally stumped. I don't get this. Because if you figure it was bad lifter, it'd be a bad lifter on this one. I was like, I think you need to pull off the head. I think something's wrong. So he calls me this weekend. He goes, man, I feel like an idiot, but I found it. And I said, what was it? And I'm going to show you what it is because this is part of the story. Now, what I have here, they don't make this piston anymore. This is a probe piston. But most pistons come like this. This one is kind of unique, not unique, but several pistons, well, if you'll notice, these are the notches for your valve pockets. So your valves go in here. Several of the pistons used to have it where they were the same. So in other words, this side is the same as this side. A lot of the cheaper pistons, not making fun of probe pistons, even though they're not around anymore. A lot of the cheaper pistons did it this way because it was easier to sell sets because they're all the same. So this pocket's the same as this, so you could run it either way. You could have the exhaust valve here, you could intake valve here, it didn't matter. However, a lot of you should know now that there's many pistons that are not this way. They will have a big old notch, and that's for the intake valve, and a much smaller one over here for the exhaust valve. And those have to be lined up with the valve on the head. So if you have an intake notch, it better match the intake valve on the head. So for instance, if I had a piston here, you'd have an intake notch here and here, and exhaust ones here and here. You get what I'm saying? I'm sure if you build enough engines, you know what I mean. So that's how they should be. This particular piston, because the eyebrows are the same, you could run it in either one of them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one is you as long as this gun's got a dome, as long as the dome is in the chamber side. So it seems common sense to you, but I'm getting to it because I know several people have done this because it's now the second time this has happened. Not with Tony. So some have a big old notch like this for the intake valve. You with me? So he pulls off the head, and you guess what happens? When he pulls off the head, the pistons are in backwards. Now he's running a hydraulic roller cam, but he has the pistons in backwards, which means the intake pocket is actually on the exhaust valve. So of course the exhaust valve is great because now it has this huge old gap for it to sit in. But the intake valve was hitting a little bitty pocket and hitting right there. So I don't have a picture of his pistons. I know you're disappointed by that. It was hitting right there. So when we were hearing this tapping, or not really a tapping, it was the valve hitting that piston. So it was making contact with the piston. So that was the sound I was hearing. It was like, you did a video on that? I wasted 7 minutes of my life for you to tell me something that everybody else knows. No. If that's what you thought I was going to teach you in this video, no, that's not it. So Tony says, I found it. I'll let you know. I feel like an idiot. I put the piston in the wrong hole. When I'm switching around, I fired it up and everything seems fine. I was like, whoa, buddy. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You mean you put it all back together and you started it up? And he said, yeah, sure did. And it sounds great. I said, man, I'm telling you right now, you need to pull that head back off. And he's like, why would I do that? Because this is the point I'm teaching you with this story. I said, here's why. That valve hit that piston. You saw the mark. The valve is bent. I promise you, it's bent. And he goes, no, it's not. No, it can't be. He goes, you know what? I did a compression test on all of them. And he did. He compression tested all of them. They were all the same, like 180 pounds cranking pressure. Every one of them. I said, well, that's cool. And he goes, I went further. Before I put the heads back on, I poured solvent in each one of the holes. Or gasoline. I can't remember if it was solvent or gasoline. None of it came out. It didn't come out of any of the valves. It ain't bent. I said, Tony, you'll have a lot better peace of mind if you take that head off and let me pull out some of those valves, because I promise you at least one is bent. So he's like, I'll think about it. Well, Tony, he is a good guy, and I told you he was. So he pulls off the head and he brings it to me. And I do one of my tests, which is a vacuum test. So in other words, I put a plate on here and I suck a vacuum through here. And if the valve job's messed up at all, if there's any pinhole at all in here, it won't pull a vacuum. So it pulls, the vacuum gauge usually pulls between 23 and 21. So the smallest hole, it won't get there. Well, his was every single one of them, and I checked. pulled 23. And by the way, I wish I'd done a video on it, or like I'd recorded as I was doing it, because it would have made a way better video than just me talking. But I'm not that guy. Like, I love Old Man's Garage because he records everything he does, which would make an awesome one. I don't do that. But anyway, back to it. It passed vacuum. And he's like, well, I told you I had nothing to worry about. I pulled off this head for nothing. So let me pull off some of the valves. So I pull out some of the valves. So I pulled out this one already and put it back in. And I pulled out these as well. So I pulled off the valves, okay? And this is one of them. Right here, this is the intake valve. And I pulled it off. Now, if you look at the valve, this is the face of it. Does it look like it hit anything? Nope, not really. Looks pretty good, right? Well, this is the same way as another one looked. Let me show you this, because I pulled it out and I was like, remember, this thing held fluid in it. It held fluid in it. And you're like, there's no way it's bent. It held fluid in it. You could pour fluid in it. It didn't ooze out. There's no way that valve's bent. It also pulled a vacuum. There's no way that's bent. That's what he was telling me. I was like, all right, let me show you this. This is one of the intake valves. This is my valve refacer, so it's sitting up here. This thing is accurate. So I'm just gonna kick it on and watch this. Ready? See it? That valve was in the head while it was running. That valve was in either one of these two holes while it was running. It was that bent. Now this valve is the same way. It doesn't look that way, but it's also bent. It had two bent valves in there. It passed vacuum. It didn't leak any fluid. Why am I telling you this? This is the point of the story. Here's what would have happened if he didn't pull off the head. Because I've seen this happen more than once. If he didn't pull off this head and he left it alone, what's happened? Because in his mind, everything's fine. If there's a bent valve, air should leak around it. No. And that's what's weird. He's also like, it's a hydraulic roller spring. There's no way it bends it straight. These are small, got a little stem on them. You get a little bit of speed with it. It will concave or turn itself into that groove. And it will seal up, but it will be bent. So had he kept running, here's exactly what would happen, because I've seen it happen before. What eventually ends up happening is this valve, every time it does that, it's going to move. So it's going to turn. And that bend is going to keep going back and forth. And metal will eventually fatigue. And what will happen is this stem of this valve will snap off. The valve will fall off, and hit the piston, and catastrophic damage. The person will then go, cheap piece of crap, valves failed. It was AFR's fault, because AFR, you know, they have a lifetime warranty on the casting and a 2-year on the part. So this, Tony probably wouldn't have done this, but some person might have called up and said, hey, AFR, and talked to Scott, because he's the one in the warranty. Hey man, your valves suck, it broke. When the whole time it was bent because it hit something you thought it was okay. That's the most important thing I could teach you from today's video. If your valve ever touches anything, you need to take them out and take a machine shop and see if it's actually bent. Here's another example just to prove it. This one's a different scenario altogether. I actually put this in the valve refacer. See how it's shiny here? Now let me turn it the other side. Not. This is at trying to take 5 thousandths off. This wasn't because someone put the piston in wrong. This was the ProCharger impeller blew up. And what it did is it went through the engine. And small pieces that go into the engine, sometimes they go out of the engine. So in this case, a small piece was wedged right here, so it landed in between the seat. Boom, the valve closed. It tweaked the valve just enough, bent it just a little. And then the next cycle, that piece went out and it went back to being this way. This valve was screwed. It's bent. That's because something went through it. So if you ever have something go through your engine that makes the valve move in a different way, the valve is ruined. You need to check them. That's a quick way. You're like, oh, it passed everything else. It's fine. That's a quick way to tear up your engine. So that's the most powerful lesson I have for you today. And that's the point of the story. So really hope you guys got something out of this, because it happens way more than you think. And by the way, if you think, well, Tony is just a mistake for putting the valves backwards or the pistons backwards, no. Let me tell you another really quick one. The reason why I don't sell SI valves anymore is this story. So I did and I'm making this one super fast. Poured a set of heads for a guy. He put it on the engine, started up, Poured a set of heads for a guy. He had someone else build the engine for him using the heads I gave him. They started up in the race car. It got to about 1,400 RPMs. He's letting it idle, and all of a sudden, boom, locks itself up. It broke a valve. So they take the engine out, take the engine to the engine builder. Engine builder's like, that guy used piece of crap valves, and that's why it failed. Those were SI valves, and that's why I don't sell the SI valves anymore. Not because of the SI valves, because of the story. And so the guy's like, you use piece of crap valves. And I was like, I don't think so, because the people that I got the recommendation to use SI valves, I've sold thousands, never had this problem. So it's hard to imagine that this did it, especially at 1,400 RPM. I just can't see it happening. He's like, well, no. So he actually takes the valve and he goes to the University of Tulsa, which is here, to their engineering department, has a failure analysis done of the valve. Everything checks out on the valve. Like the engineers are, this is fine. This is normal what it should be, normal fatigue like, everything else is right. But me being me, because I'm going to be kind, I give him a whole new head, one head, and the other one was fine. Give him a whole new head, redo the two heads so they match, whole thing. They go to put the engine back together, and they notice the pocket was off. And the reason why it broke the valve wasn't because of the valve. It's because the pocket was in the wrong one, and it broke. So did I get any money back for that? No. So point being is, a lot of people make the mistake about putting pistons in the wrong hole. Just make sure you don't do that. But the biggest one is, if your valve touched something, it's bent. So hope you guys got something out of it, and thanks for watching. Remember, I'm no Superman, but I do want to show you this. Boom! I've reflowed the LS3 head after doing the valve job. I'll do a video on that later. This guy's been waiting forever. This is the Cadillac head. I finally redid this on a bigger bore, so that one's later too. Also, you like my mug? Put in the comments if you know what this is from. Anyway, guys, take care.